Welcome to this explainer on the untold history of time. Okay, let's dive right into this fascinating journey by imagining something kind of wild. A world completely stripped of modern timekeeping. No dates, no years, no digital clocks ticking away on your microwave or your phone. It's a reality that's honestly almost impossible for us to picture today.
So, what would life actually be like without those clocks or dates? I mean, really ask yourself. Imagine waking up tomorrow without a phone, a watch, or even a basic calendar. How would you know when the rains are coming? Or, when a massive dry spell is about to hit? For our ancient ancestors, time wasn't some neat little schedule you could just pop into an app. It was this invisible, completely uncontrollable force, almost like an enemy that they couldn't catch and definitely couldn't pause.
And really, tracking time meant one simple thing: survival. For early agricultural societies, figuring out the calendar wasn't some intellectual luxury or a fun little hobby. It was literally a matter of life and death. Think about it. If you planted your seeds too early, before the frost cleared, your crops froze. If you waited too long and planted too late, they just dried up in the blazing sun. So understanding the flow of time meant the absolute difference between mass starvation and survival.
Which brings us to Section 1, Survival and First Calendars. Let's look at a major historical milestone and see exactly how early humans started having this silent, brilliant conversation with the sky to solve that whole survival problem. Consider this incredible ancient artifact found in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Ishango bone. Roughly 2,000 years ago, someone took a baboon bone and meticulously carved 168 systematic grooves right into it, spread across 3 columns. Well, when archaeologist Alexander Marshak analyzed this under a microscope back in the 1970s, he found a stunning correlation. These columns perfectly match the 29.5-day lunar cycle. No way, right? This essentially suggests that ancient hunter-gatherers were already tracking a 6-month lunar calendar way before formal cities, kings, or organized civilizations even existed.
Moving into our next section, Stonehenge, monument, or calendar. Let's jump forward in time and across the world to see how humanity evolved from carving tiny bones to dragging massive, towering stones across Britain.
Now, the iconic stones of Stonehenge have sparked some intense historical debates, especially recently in the Antiquity Journal. On one side of the debate, you've got Professor Timothy Darville's 2022 theory. He argued that Stonehenge was actually a highly sophisticated, perpetual 365-day solar calendar. He figured the 30 outer stones represented the days of the month, and the 5 central stones were the extra days needed to hit 365, even accounting for leap years. Pretty genius, right? But then, just a year later in 2023, mathematician Giulio Maglia and astronomer Juan Antonio Belmonte totally pushed back. They disputed the math, basically saying it was being forced to fit modern expectations, and claimed Stonehenge was actually an ancestor memorial, not some giant calculator. It really makes you wonder if we're just projecting our modern obsession with time onto these ancient monuments.
Up next is Section 3, India's lunisolar precision. Because while the West was busy analyzing these massive stones, ancient Indian intellectuals were tackling an incredibly complex mathematical crisis of the cosmos.
And the absolute crux of this crisis comes down to one single frustrating number: 11. This number represents the annual 11-day mismatch between the lunar cycle and the solar year. And let me tell you, this was a giant puzzle that baffled the greatest astronomers from Egypt to Rome for centuries.
When you lay out the math, the crisis becomes pretty obvious. Ancient scholars like Rishi Lagada around 1500 BC had to face this head-on. A lunar year, which is based on 12 29.5-day months, gives you exactly 354 days. But the solar year, the one that actually dictates the real-world seasons for farming, is 365 days. So if you just blindly follow the moon, your critical summer planting season would disastrously shift into the dead of winter in just 10 to 15 years. Total agricultural collapse.
But it turns out ancient Indian astronomers found an incredibly elegant solution to this problem, known as a dikmos, or malmos. Instead of randomly deleting days, or just watching the seasons drift into absolute chaos, they calculated that by inserting one exact 13th month every 32.5 months, the lunar and solar calendars would perfectly sync back up. It's like a genius piece of ancient software, an organic autocorrection that meant the calendar stayed incredibly accurate without anyone ever having to artificially erase a single day.
This deep, profound understanding eventually led to the 5 pillars of the Panchang, India's traditional lunisolar system. We're talking about Tithi, Nakshatra, Yoga, Karana, and Var.
These aren't just there to tell you what time of day it is. They dynamically map the Earth's precise position relative to the entire cosmos. It forms this beautiful, continuous scientific system that has been running smoothly for literally thousands of years.
And if you want to know just how far this precision went, consider the 13th century Konark Sun Temple, built by King Narasimhadeva I in Odisha. The temple features 24 massive stone wheels that act as incredibly precise sundials. I mean, ancient Indian intellectuals mapped time down to micro-units called Truti and Nimish. If you place your finger at the center of one of these wheels, the shadow cast on a specific bead will give you the precise time down to the minute. Time wasn't just functional here. It was treated as a divine, mathematically perfect cycle.
All right, moving on to Section 4, Rome's political calendar chaos. Let's shift gears completely and head over to the West, where time wasn't being used for cosmic or agricultural alignment at all. No, it was actually being weaponized for politics. During the days of the Roman Republic, the calendar basically became a massive political joke. Roman priests, known as pontifices, actually had the power to alter the length of the year. So think about this. If their political buddy was in power, they just magically made the year longer. If an enemy was in power, boom, they shrank it. They were literally gerrymandering time itself. This created such insane chaos that summer festivals were actually being celebrated in the spring. The entire system had become completely disconnected from nature.
Which brings us to the absolute breaking point, 445. That is the massive, frankly unbelievable number of days that it took to hit the reset button on this horribly broken political system.
To wash away the old sins of this deeply corrupted calendar, Julius Caesar finally stepped in. Teaming up with the brilliant astronomer Sosigenes of Alexandria, he declared 46 BC the year of confusion. And boy, did it live up to the name. To get the calendar back on track with the sun, the citizens of Rome had to endure a grueling, chaotic, 445-day-long year. But from the ashes of that confusion, the 365-day Julian calendar, complete with leap years, was born.
There was just one tiny little problem. A ticking time bomb in Sosigenes' math. The Julian calendar assumed a year was exactly 365.25 days. But the true solar reality? The year is actually 11 minutes and 4 seconds shorter than that. Now I know what you're thinking. 11 minutes. Who cares, right? But the consequence of that tiny mathematical error was that the calendar drifted one full day behind every 128 years. This seemingly harmless mistake would eventually snowball into a massive crisis for the church centuries later.
Which leads us right into Section 5, Europe's missing 10 days. Fast forward to 1582, where this tiny 11-minute math error forced Pope Gregory XIII to take some seriously extreme, reality-altering measures. By 1582, the Julian calendar was a full 10 days out of sync with the sun, which was disastrously pushing Easter into the wrong dates entirely. Relying on his top astronomers, Pope Gregory issued a radical decree. Just think about how this actually played out for a second. On October 4th, 1582, people went to sleep just like normal. But the next morning when they woke up, it was October 15th. Literally, 10 entire days were permanently erased from human history. The Pope also introduced the modern leap century rule to fix that pesky 11-minute drift once and for all.
As you can imagine, the sheer human panic this caused was absolutely incredible. People were running through the streets shouting, "They stole our days!" I mean, put yourself in their shoes. Imagine being a worker suddenly wondering what happened to 10 days of your hard-earned wages, or a tenant freaking out about when rent was due. There were full-on riots. And since this was a Catholic decree, Protestant countries like Britain resisted the change until 1752, meaning they eventually had to skip 11 days. Russia held out until their 1918 revolution. It just goes to show time wasn't just math, it was deeply tied to identity and religion.
Let's bring it all together in our final section, our shared human heritage. All of this history brings us to a really powerful realization about the modern world we live in today and the incredibly diverse, parallel paths we took to get here. When we look at history objectively, we see these two brilliant paths. On one hand, you have the Gregorian calendar. Historians pretty much universally agree it gave us the strict, unified global standard we absolutely need today. Without it, things like global stock markets, synchronized internet servers, and international aviation would be a total mess. But on the other hand, you have the Indian Luni solar system, with its incredibly clever Adhik Mas, which meant it never had to permanently delete a single day. It continues to thrive alongside the Gregorian calendar today, maintaining this beautiful, organic, and unbroken connection to the cycles of nature, festivals, and agriculture.
So the absolute key takeaway here is this. Turning all of this into some competition about which civilization was best entirely misses the point. When we play that comparison game, we really undermine the shared global struggle. Timekeeping isn't about picking winners. It is the ultimate collective victory of thousands of unnamed astronomers, mathematicians, stone carvers, and laborers across all civilizations who contributed to this massive puzzle, inch by inch, over thousands of years.
We are all just passengers floating through time, but our ancestors, they were the ones who managed to actually name it, box it, and capture it. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought. Next time you glance down at your watch or check your phone, are you just going to see numbers, or will you see the greatest, most hard-fought struggle of human civilization staring right back at you? Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me today, and I really encourage you to drop your own thoughts and perspectives on this incredible journey down in the comments.